his ability to coach and really help people to grow. So I've been really a beneficiary of that. And what can I say about him is that he's not like a Porsche. You know what I mean? Like flashy, and he wants to be a Porsche, but he's not. But he's a Volvo. Very steady, very reliable, and very responsible. And he is someone who's helped me over the years to really get to where I was, and really doing something that I really enjoy. My work is very successful now, and he has helped me a lot. So I would say he's a backbone for me. I'm the head. So what can I say? I mean, if you need a coach who, a lot of people expect from a coach of really fast results. And in our fast food kind of world, I think that's what we expect, like a real fast results. But I think what really endures is someone who can help you over time. And slow and steady wins the race, and I think that's Jay. And if you need a coach, he's a great coach to get to where you are to where you want to go. So engage him.
Quite a lot to talk about this morning. I think I kind of overdid the promise in the little brochure, talking about conflict, talking about culture, talking about how coaching can help in both those scenarios, but also, I guess, talking about the experiences that you guys have had. So there's quite a lot. I wanted it to be a bit more interactive, but I'm afraid you're going to hear a sermon, and then the balance of the time at the end will be the questions and answers. So thank you for telling me to increase the volume. First, I want to just say thank you to the sponsors and to John for having this event regularly here in Edmonds and also in Bellevue. This is an entirely different culture for me. So coming from Bellevue, this is the rig. But next time I'm here, I'll be in my shorts and t-shirts too. So, but I'm glad there's at least one lawyer who holds up the tradition. So thank you that I'm not out of place. Most of you could probably teach me a couple of things about conflict, culture, and coaching. I know there are a lot of coaches in this room. There's some coaches in this room. So many of you have been in different aspects of cross-cultural work, whether Eastern Europe as Matt has, or different parts of Asia as John has, and of course you guys with the Hispanic community and reaching out to the Indian community. There's just so much there. So I know that you guys could actually be teaching or taking this seminar. I just have to be in the hot seat because John says so, right? This is a book that had a lot of influence on me. It says how to create wealth from conflicting values. And it was written basically about cross-cultural competence by a Dutchman and an Englishman back in the 70s. Now, I have a clicker here, so what is this clicker going to do? I presume right is left. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that work through joint force, which is a vehicle basically for a number of practitioners to get together. There's a colleague of mine who's in Delhi, who's actually an American, and here I am an Indian in America. We have another colleague in Seattle, as well as one in Singapore. So the idea is to try and ride the waves of culture basically across the Pacific, and see what we can do, helping people in different ways. And our main customers are entrepreneurs, one-man shows, to small businesses, non-profits. Those are the people that we've chosen to serve. The big boys have the big boys to look after them, and they're way ahead of the game anyway. But I thought that this would be, and I guess we're differentiated by our own cross-cultural journeys, the people that we've got on the team. Now, I mean, I don't really want to spend a lot of time on my own journey, because I know that each one of you have your journeys, which are probably as vibrant as mine. But I guess I do want to kind of say how God has worked in my life by opening all kinds of doors. That I guess a little bit is probably worthwhile, and seeing the cross-cultural windows and doors that have opened for me. Well, that's me in my different parts of my life, different phases of my life. When I was 19, I hitchhiked from New Delhi to London, and I guess that was my first cross-cultural journey. That was, and many parts of it were memorable, but certainly I remember my time in Turkey, when Istanbul. What a fascinating city. That was back in the 70s, so it was completely different to what it is now. And I remember going into the big public bath there, this beautiful marble edifice, and I thought, having seen all these James Bond films, that we would be shrouded in steam and spies and Mata Haris, and there'd be some beautiful girl giving me a massage. Little did I know that it was a big hairy guy kind of trampling all over me. So it was like so rudely awakened into thinking that, realizing that there is something about this culture business. But even before then, in Afghanistan, which is where one of my grandmothers came from, I was very happy to be in Afghanistan. Back in the 70s, there wasn't this kind of conflict that there's going on now. Just talking to ordinary Afghans in the coffee shop, somebody came up and put a couple of, a little bit of a gift in my front pocket. It was so amazed that somebody I'd barely spoken to, hardly knew, but who smiled a lot, gave me a gift. When I turned out later to pull out that gift, I discovered it was a couple of sticks of hashish. That's also, a great sign of friendship. It's like giving somebody a bottle of wine, I guess, right? And further down the journey, coming from this whole warm, relationship-oriented journey all the way through Pakistan, through Afghanistan, through Iran, and in those days, and through Turkey, through Greece, and arriving in Austria, it was a total change, of course, as you can imagine. It wasn't the Seattle freeze. It was probably 20 times worse. Yes, no, who are you, what do you want, why are you here? That's it. Move along. So that was like culture shock. But at any rate, to cut a long story short, made it to London, expected to be there for just a holiday, ended up staying 10 years, ended up as a CPA, or a chartered accountant as we call them, in England, working principally with the English people, really primarily with English people in those days. It was the 70s, there weren't any other cultures around there at that time. Every other colony was too busy looking after its own affairs to arrive in England at that point. So that was the first time I really, I guess, began to start looking at culture. Since then, I know Daniel talked about my resume, but that's, I think, on the flyer to this program, and I don't want to repeat it. But yes, opportunities did open out for me in London as a CPA. It was, I failed my maths, 9th standard math. I was asked to leave the maths class because I got 0 out of 100. But how did I come to be a CPA? Those some of those things that I can only ascribe now to providential intervention, not to my own ability. I've always thought everything has happened because of me. From London, was back to Delhi for a while, for about 4 years. Both my children were born there. And then not happy to be a partner of a firm of chartered accountants for the rest of my life, off to Hong Kong. Hong Kong, again, a totally different experience. The moment I stepped foot there, there are just Chinese people all around you. And growing up in India, we'd had a war with China. In 1962, the Tibetans had been forced to flee. So for us, we always imagined Chinese were the bad people. But what a shock and surprise. 8 years into Hong Kong, and I just didn't want to leave because, again, God opened all kinds of doors for me to work in an international bank that took me into Northeast Asia and China, responsible for operations, working with teams and people, hands-on, and then on to Singapore. Thereafter that, in charge of a global human resource development of the same international bank. So that's when I kind of moved away from the world of finance and operations into people development. Fascinating to kind of discover the cultures of Southeast Asia. Love your country, Erwin. It's the food, of course, is phenomenal, but the variety in people is just incredible as well. I mean, I think I can't remember how many, but there's just thousands of different subcultures in Indonesia, which was always a favorite. Singapore is where I met my wife, Danielle, who is Korean born but Singaporean and has much more cross-cultural experience than I have, and she would probably be a good person to give this talk to. But then back to India, where I kind of looked at that whole aspect of culture and in India and said, wow, there's such a lot going on in India itself, that I started up a business, cross-cultural expeditions, introducing individual schools pretty much as a coaching platform, but also some excitement in venturing into different territories in India and some of the 4,500 ethnic groups that we have over there. It's just so fascinating. At the same time, introducing Danielle to India from the village upwards. So from there, it was to New York City to work in a nonprofit which was focused on leadership development with the Ivy League colleges. So totally different from sitting with warriors and tribals to tramping the halls of the Ivy League colleges, shuttling between Princeton and Harvard, and trying to keep pace with all those intellectual people in that scenario. But people are people in some respects, so had an absolutely wonderful time there. Anyway, on to what I wanted to talk about more is basically the question, what is the opportunity? We're sitting here in the Northwest. Back in 1962, this term global village was coined, and I think it's been slow catching up in some parts of the world, but now it's in full bloom. And I come to Bellevue from New York last year, New York being such a diverse place. My wife dragged me across to Seattle, saying, I want to go and live in Seattle. So being the boss, of course, I have to kowtow and listen to her. But what an amazing surprise to arrive in Seattle, into Bellevue, and discover the amazing diversity, all the ingredients that are necessary for an economic innovation, for that kind of an explosion to happen, just around us in this Puget Sound area. Yes, it's 3 out of 5 jobs in Washington State that are related to international trade in some way or the other, whether it's export of apples, hops, beer, wine, aircraft, coffee, you name it. So we know all about that. There's plenty of that happening. In the Bellevue area, 80 languages are spoken in Bellevue schools. So you can imagine if language is spoken in home, the culture probably continues and carries with the child. So they estimate that in another 10 years, 51% of the population of Bellevue will be of a different ethnic origin than is now. Now I think it's up to about 40% who are foreign-born residents. So these are all highly talented people, highly educated people. So along with them have come across their cultures. It's a different kind of immigrant stream, and there are all kinds of opportunities. And I don't know what you guys talked about on your tables, but certainly great opportunities for real estate people, for lawyers, for accountants, for all kinds of businesses. Somebody wanted to start exporting coffee from here. Somebody wanted to import coffee from India and roast it here and re-export it. So all kinds of things. But there we are, placed very strategically in that corner. With Latin America, just fly to Phoenix and you're in Latin, and after that you're in Latin America. Just fly across to Seoul, Korea, and after that the whole of Asia opens up to you. So what is it that we're doing with this opportunity both ways? Now the big boys have discovered this, of course, the Microsofts and the Boeings. So we have it's a good heritage that we have here in the Northwest. I was at Bellevue City Hall, where I also work as a mediator and dealing principally with cross-cultural conflicts. And I was amazed to see this photograph of the first Boeing engineer hired was a Chinese guy in the 1930s. So there is a good heritage in this area of foreign talent coming in and used. And of course, by the time you get to Microsoft, they've figured out that bringing people from different cultures together creates innovation. So I guess the question really is, have the rest of us got that same opportunity? Have we been able to step out? Do we see something beyond what it is that we're doing at the moment? Although we may be very happy fishing in the waters that we're fishing in, can we look further afield? I think both Erwin and my wife are examples of people who stepped out of their culture and working in different cultures and making money out of that. And the two boys here, I think that's really very commendable that you kind of had this time overseas as well in learning. So we see what happens. Now the coaching process, how does that kind of help and how does that show up? And I think the initial thing is, that bit about energy, how do I show up? How do I engage with the environment that's around me? How do I engage with each of you? What is my energy like? It's like we were at the Bellevue Farmers Market yesterday. You can quite easily pass by a food truck and not buy something. But when the lady leans forward and engages with you, you're drawn in. You hear a bit of the story, you get to know about the food, and you're immediately buying things and eating different kinds of food. So how do we show up? The second aspect is, what is the vision that I have for myself? And very often we don't have a vision beyond our own shores, beyond our own limited environment. It's like, I don't know if you've heard the story of the old fish swimming in the sea, and there are two younger fish coming towards him, and the old guy says, "Morning, boys, how's the weather? How's the water?" And they say, "What water?" Because we're just sometimes so narrowly bound within our own visions, we don't even realize where we're at. But I guess sitting here in the Northwest, I can see that this is a very vibrant area. It's ripe for us to kind of get into. Then we talk about strategies and goals and barriers. And I guess the question that I had is, well, what are the barriers? And one of the barriers, I guess, in setting sail in a foreign culture, and I'm really amazed at the way you guys are kind of stepping forward from a Hispanic culture into a multicultural organization that you're trying to build. So that's really stepping out of culture, and I guess you guys could teach me quite a lot there. But just to kind of vaguely define what culture is, and I think a lot of you may be already familiar with this iceberg kind of model, that there are things that we see on the surface that we may be comfortable with. People may be dressing in suits and ties, and therefore we think they're a bit like you, but what lies beneath the surface? What are the values and behaviors that are driving a person? That remains a bit hidden. Or alternatively, the outward appearances could put you off. I mean, you may reach your hand out to shake somebody's hand and the person bows, and that immediately throws you. So there are all kinds of things that can then start building up some sort of a barrier to say, well, I don't really want to engage with that person because it's too tough. And I have a little thing over here, which I'm going to pass around, that in due course you do have a look at it. I'm not going to go through it at the moment, but have a look at it. It's how we react to cultural incidents, and we can either kind of walk away from them or embrace them. And at the end of the day, culture is very simply, how you were brought up and what happens when when you're confronted by everyday situations. And now the cultural specialists, anthropologists have done a project to group aspects of values, beliefs, faith into different into different global settings. So I'll just quickly read out there. There's Confucian Asia, there's Southern Asia, there's Latin America, there's Nordic Europe, Anglo-Germanic Europe, Latin Europe, which is different to Latin America, Sub-Sahara Africa, Eastern Europe, and the Middle East. So most countries can fall in there. And you might say, well, why is that country okay? Why is that country there? Why is it not? So we have that information. The journey. What is the journey to cross-cultural competence? A lot of us kind of minimize. We say, well, we're all the same. And we are all the same. God made us all the same in certain ways. But by not taking advantage of going the further journey, we cut ourselves from different opportunities. So be aware of this journey that, we all slide back and forth in this journey from time to time. When I'm under stress with my wife, I kind of get into a defensive mode. What are the influences on culture? You know, educational institutions, all that kind of stuff. You know, your ethnic aspect. When we got married, in fact, I was really mad that all the wedding presents were being given to her brother and her sister-in-law, and not to us. But that was the Korean custom, you know. And all the stuff went there, and I was saying, like, what happened? What happened to all the money that was going to come our way? So there are these differences. Now, there are many cultural models out there. These are some of them. Many different aspects. But if you're an American, you're probably looking at task orientation, get the job done there, as opposed to countries in the Confucian area, and in fact France, where they're looking to build relationships. So if you're trying to do business there, that's going to hold you up. Now, conflict, I said I'd speak a little bit about conflict. Basically, there are different levels from assertiveness to cooperativeness. Personally, I find myself in this area, because I need to kind of say yes to my wife all the time. So I find, but really where we really get the most of everything is when we come into this area, win-win outcomes and collaborating. And that's in fact what my coaching is about. We look at ways of increasing anabolic energy, which creates, and reducing catabolic energy. That's the kind of model that the further up you go, when you start reconciling differences as your core thought, then what you're going to, the action, the result is going to be acceptance, and therefore an ability to actually create and innovate. Those are some characteristics of a person with anabolic energy or creative energy. So the question really is, what are we waiting for? You know, do we want to be separate like that bunch of fruit, which is also good, or do we want to be kind of mix ourselves up and see what comes out of it? And that's where I want to end and ask people questions. Now, the coaching that we do is basically about courage, because it does take courage to work, step forward into a new situation. How do you make decisions in an unfamiliar environment? How do you develop your people, you know, to do the things that you want them to do to make that business succeed? So those are some of the things we do. And I want to now just ask anybody who could have questions on things, because I think we have a bit of time for that, right?
5 minutes for questions.
Or your own experiences, you know, in answering those questions out there. What opportunities have you seen for yourselves, Elisa?
Executives that find you and need your services, your coaching?
I wish more executives would. Unfortunately, a lot of ladies tend to find me. So that's why I have a lady coach to kind of pass them on to, because my wife wouldn't put up with that. The clause would be out. But it is executives, because I have an executive experience, but it is also people looking mid-career and saying, well, what do I do with my life now? Pretty much as people come to Dick with that same question. So. But it could be a younger couple who are in some kind of marital issue. It could be a business person who's saying, well, you know, how do I get to the next step? How do I present myself? How do I start? You know, I feel restricted because there's some gremlin, there's some limiting factor. I've hit an invisible barrier. I've grown so much now. Something's not happening. What am I doing wrong? So it's a variety of people. Dennis.
Once you engage with somebody from another culture and things go well, you understand how enjoyable it is.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us want to approach someone from another culture, but we're not sure how or what to expect or even how to approach them. Is it appropriate to actually just ask questions as to, well, I mean, I've done it with you.
Pretty much.
You know, I mean, do you shake hands? Do you bow? I mean, how do you know?
I think that's the only way, unless you come to my trainings. That's the only way, and nobody can be culture specific on every culture. So
we would be more concerned about offending them by even asking. How would they receive it?
I don't think anybody would be offended by it, because it shows concern and care for the other person's culture, and that's a validation of a person. So you can never go wrong with that anywhere in the world. And the other one is the smile. You've got a beautiful smile. I've gone through my life through all those different cultures just with a smile and looking into people's hearts and letting God do the rest. Yes.
No, so my issue is like I am pretty judgmental against people who are different. Like we have a lot of Muslim people. I mean, not just Muslims. No, I'm not talking about religion, but just the way they dress. So I'm always like, oh, why does he wear that long outfit? And in my own mind, that's what's going through my head. So it's not that I'm prejudiced. It's just that I find it awkward to even engage because of the style and approach I have. Just because he dressed differently or the
Yeah.
lady dresses differently.
That's
So
all.
how would you?
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, that,
I have to work on
well,
myself.
that's always going to be an issue, and there's a wonderful cartoon which illustrates this perfectly. It's a lady in a burqa and a lady in a bikini, and they're both looking at each other, and the lady in the burqa is saying, "My God, she has to expose so much flesh, such a male-dominated society," and the lady in the bikini is looking at the burqa and saying, "My God, all covered up, what a male-dominated society she comes from." We think that people are at one level, we judge each other through that aspect. But I think the way you handled it with one of our neighbors was fine. Hello, I'd like to get to know you. Talk to the woman directly, and yeah, that's fine. So if she says no, don't be offended. Don't think it's against you. Just step back and say, how else could I approach this person? John's checking me out.